December 1941, San Francisco, California. The air raid sirens tore through the night like the screams of dying animals. Thomas Calloway dropped his coffee mug. It shattered against the linoleum floor of his cramped apartment and stumbled toward the window. Blackout curtains. He'd forgotten to close them again. "Damn it," he muttered, yanking the heavy fabric across the glass. Outside, searchlights carved white columns through the darkness, sweeping back and forth across the bay. San Francisco had been on edge since Pearl Harbor. 2 weeks of paranoia, of waiting for Japanese bombers that everyone swore were coming. Thomas didn't know what to believe anymore. He'd been rejected from military service 3 times. Flat feet and a childhood bout of rheumatic fever had marked him as unfit, worthless to the war effort. The sirens grew louder. He grabbed his coat and fled down the narrow stairwell of the boarding house, his footsteps echoing against the walls. Other tenants pushed past him, Mrs. Chin clutching her infant son, old Mr. Kowalski cursing in Polish. The building superintendent, Frank Doherty, stood at the entrance, waving people toward the basement shelter. "Move it, Calloway. This ain't a drill." Thomas didn't think it was a drill either. His heart hammered against his ribs as he descended into the damp basement. The shelter smelled of mildew and fear. 20 people crammed into a space meant for 10, sitting on folding chairs or concrete floor, their faces pale in the flickering yellow light of kerosene lamps. He found a spot against the far wall and pressed his back against the cold brick. Someone was crying softly. A child, maybe 5 years old, buried his face in his mother's shoulder. That's when he heard it. A sound from the corner, ragged breathing, fast and shallow. Thomas turned his head. A young woman sat alone in the shadows, her arms wrapped tight around herself. She was shivering violently despite the thick wool coat she wore. Her hair was dark, pinned up in the style women favored now that they'd taken over factory jobs. Practical, no nonsense. But strands had come loose, falling across her face. She looked about his age, maybe 25, but there was something ancient in her eyes when she glanced up and caught him staring. She looked terrified, not the normal fear everyone wore tonight. This was different, deeper, like she'd seen something the rest of them hadn't. Thomas hesitated. He didn't know her. None of his business, really. But she was shaking so hard, he thought she might fall apart. He stood and crossed the shelter, crouching beside her. "Hey," he said quietly. "You all right?" Stupid question. Nobody was all right. She didn't answer, just stared at him with those haunted eyes, green. He noticed, even in the dim light, her lips were turning blue. "When's the last time you ate something?" he asked. Still nothing. Thomas shrugged off his coat and draped it over her shoulders. She flinched at the contact, but didn't pull away. He sat down beside her, leaving a respectful distance. "Name's Thomas. Thomas Calloway." He kept his voice low, conversational. "I live upstairs. 3rd floor, room 304. The one with the leaky ceiling." A pause. Then, barely audible, "Eleanor." "Eleanor." He nodded. "That's a good name. My grandmother was named Eleanor." Another silence. The sirens continued their wail above them. Is this real?" she whispered suddenly. "Are they really coming?" Thomas wanted to lie. To tell her everything would be fine. But he'd never been good at lying. "I don't know," he admitted. Maybe not, but we're safe down here." She laughed, a brittle, broken sound. "Safe. Right. Where are you from, Eleanor?" "Here, San Francisco." But the way she said it felt like a lie. "Family?" Her jaw tightened. "My father's overseas. Army Air Corps. He's been gone since June." Thomas felt something twist in his chest. "My brother's in the Pacific. Marine Corps. Haven't heard from him in 3 weeks." Eleanor's shivering began to slow. She pulled his coat tighter around herself. "I'm sorry," she said. "About your brother. I'm sorry about your father." They sat in silence after that, listening to sirens and the whispered prayers around them. Thomas noticed details about her now. The way her fingernails were bitten down to quick, the smudge of what looked like motor oil on her wrist, the fact that she wore men's work boots beneath her skirt. "You work at the shipyards?" he asked. She nodded. "Riveter." Swing shift. That's good work. Important. So they keep telling us. Her voice carried an edge of bitterness, while the men do the real fighting. Thomas understood that feeling better than he wanted to admit. The lights flickered. Someone gasped, but they didn't go out. "Can I ask you something?" Eleanor said, turning to face him properly for the first time. "Why did you come over here? You don't know me. You look like you needed help." "Most people don't notice." "I notice." She studied him with those two old eyes, and Thomas had the strange sensation of being assessed, measured against some invisible standard. Finally, she seemed to reach a conclusion. "Thank you," Eleanor said softly, "for the coat, for sitting here. Any time." The sirens cut off abruptly. The silence was somehow worse than the noise. Frank Doherty's voice boomed from the entrance. "All clear." False alarm. "Folks, back to your rooms." Relief rippled through the shelter. People stood, gathering their belongings. Mrs. Chen's baby started crying. Eleanor rose quickly, shrugging off Thomas's coat and handing it back. "I should go." "Wait!" Thomas stood as well. "Do you live in the building? I've never seen you before." "I'm staying with a friend. Temporarily." She moved toward the stairs, and Thomas realized she was trying to leave before anyone could ask more questions. "Eleanor." She paused, one hand on the railing. "If you ever need anything," Thomas said, "I'm in room 304, the one with the leaky ceiling." For the first time that night, Eleanor almost smiled. "I'll remember that." Then she was gone, disappearing up the stairs into the chaos of people returning to their lives. Thomas stood alone in the emptying shelter, his coat still warm from her body, and wondered why it felt like he'd just met someone who would change everything. January 1942, San Francisco. Thomas saw Eleanor 3 more times before he learned her last name. The first time was 2 days after the air raid. He'd been walking to the corner store when he spotted her outside the boarding house, arguing with a man in a Western Union uniform. The telegram messenger looked uncomfortable, shifting his weight from foot to foot, while Eleanor shook her head violently. "I'm not signing for it," she said, her voice tight. "Take it back." "Ma'am, I can't just—" "I said take it back." The messenger thrust a yellow envelope at her anyway and hurried away. Eleanor stood on the sidewalk, staring at the telegram in her hands like it was a live grenade. She was shaking again. Thomas approached slowly. "Eleanor?" She looked up, startled. For a moment, he thought she might run. Then her shoulders sagged. "It's not what you think," she said quickly. "It's not. He's not dead." "Okay." Thomas kept his voice calm. "You want to go somewhere? Get some coffee?" She nodded mutely. They ended up at Rossi's Diner, a greasy spoon 2 blocks away that smelled like burnt eggs and cigarette smoke. Eleanor ordered coffee but didn't drink it, just wrapped her hands around the chipped ceramic mug and stared at the steam rising. Thomas waited. He'd learned patience working at the cannery. Good things came to those who didn't push. Finally, Eleanor spoke. "My father's missing." The words hung in the air between them. "Missing how?" Thomas asked gently. "His squadron was sent to the Philippines. Clark Field." She swallowed hard. "They were on the ground when the Japanese bombed them. December 8th, day after Pearl Harbor." Thomas's stomach dropped. He'd read about Clark Field in the papers. Half the American air fleet in the Pacific. Destroyed on the ground. Hundreds dead. The telegram says he's missing in action. Presumed captured. Eleanor continued, her voice mechanical. "That's the 3rd one I've gotten. The first said he was alive. The second said he was wounded. Now this. I'm sorry. Everyone's sorry." She finally looked at him. "Sorry doesn't bring anyone back." Thomas couldn't argue with that. "Why did you give me your coat?" Eleanor asked suddenly. "That night in the shelter. You didn't know me. I could have been anyone. You needed help." "That's not a reason. That's an excuse." Thomas considered this. "My brother, Daniel, he's the brave one. The fighter. I'm the guy who got left behind because my body doesn't work right. I can't fight, can't serve, can't do anything that matters. But I can give some of my coat when they're cold. So I did." Eleanor's expression softened. You think kindness doesn't matter? I think it's not enough. It mattered to me. She took a sip of her coffee, grimacing at the taste. That night, I was thinking about walking into Bay, just ending it. Everything felt too heavy. Then you sat down next to me and asked if I had eaten, like that was the most important thing in the world. And I thought, maybe I can wait one more day. Thomas felt like someone had punched the air from his lungs. Don't look at me like that, Eleanor said quickly. I'm not going to do anything. I'm just being honest. I'm glad you waited, Thomas managed. Me too. She smiled, a real smile this time, small but genuine. Maybe you're braver than you think, Thomas Calloway. The second time he saw her was a week later. Thomas had picked up a shift at the docks, loading supplies onto Navy transports. Back-breaking work that left his hands blistered and his shoulders screaming, but it paid better than the cannery. He was on his lunch break, eating a sandwich Mrs. Chun had made him. She'd taken pity on him after learning he couldn't cook, when he heard a familiar voice. Calloway, that you? Eleanor emerged from behind a stack of crates, wearing canvas coveralls and a welding mask pushed up on her head. Her face was smudged with soot. What are you doing here? Thomas asked, standing. Working. They transferred some of us from the shipyard to help with repairs. She nodded at the damaged destroyer moored nearby. Took shrapnel in the Coral Sea. Needs new hull plates. Thomas had heard about the Coral Sea battle. First time the Navy had stopped a Japanese advance. Victory. The papers called it, though Thomas knew victories in wartime meant body counts on both sides. How's it going, he asked. Eleanor shrugged. Hot, dangerous, exhausting. So normal. She sat down beside him on the dock, letting her legs dangle over the edge. You working here now? Just temporarily. Extra money. Thomas hesitated. I'm trying to save up. There's a guy, friend of a friend, who says he can get me into the Merchant Marine. They're less strict about medical requirements. Eleanor turned to look at him. You really want to go that badly? I want to do something that matters. You keep saying that. Like what you do here doesn't count. She gestured at the bustling docks, the workers, the ships, the endless flow of supplies. You think wars are won just by the guys pulling triggers? Someone has to keep the machine running. Thomas. Someone has to load the ships and feed the workers and give their coats to strangers who are falling apart. That's not nothing. Thomas wanted to believe her, but every time he saw a man in uniform, every time he read about battles in Pacific, he felt the weight of his own uselessness pressing down. My father used to say something. Eleanor continued, staring out at the water. He said flying was the easy part. The hard part was coming home and explaining to people why their sons or brothers or husbands weren't coming back with you. He said the people on the ground, the ones keeping the world turning while everyone else was off fighting, they were the real heroes, the invisible ones. Your father sounds like a smart man. He is. She paused. Was. Is. I don't know what tense to use anymore. They sat in silence, watching seagulls circle overhead. Eleanor, Thomas said carefully, you never told me your last name. She went very still. Does it matter? No, I'm just curious. Another long pause. Then, Mitchell, Eleanor Mitchell. The name didn't mean anything to Thomas. He nodded and let it go. The third time was different. It was late January, nearly midnight. Thomas was in his room, trying to sleep despite the sound of Mr. Kowalski's radio blaring news reports through thin walls. Another defeat in the Philippines. MacArthur retreating. Thousands of Americans trapped on Bataan Peninsula. Someone knocked on his door. Thomas sat up confused. Nobody visited at midnight. He opened the door to find Eleanor standing in the hallway, soaking wet. It had been raining all evening, cold, miserable San Francisco rain that turned the streets into rivers. Her hair hung in dark ropes around her face, and she was crying. I didn't know where else to go, she whispered. Thomas pulled her inside without hesitation. What happened? They're sending women to the camps. What? Who? Japanese families. American citizens. Thomas. People I work with. Mrs. Tanaka from the riveting line. They came for her today. Her husband been dead for 10 years. She's got 3 kids, and they just took them. Eleanor was shaking again, like that night in the shelter. They took them because of their faces, because of where their grandparents were born. Thomas had heard rumors about the internment orders. Executive Order 9066. He'd try not to think about it too hard. Easy to focus on his own problems. Mrs. Chin downstairs. Eleanor continued, her words tumbling out fast and frantic. She's Chinese, but people can't tell the difference. She wears a badge now that says, I am Chinese. Can you imagine? Having to prove you're the right kind of Asian, or they'll put you in a cage. Eleanor, this is what we're fighting for? This is what my father's missing for? So we can turn into the same monsters we're fighting against. She collapsed onto his bed, the only furniture in the tiny room besides a chair and a dresser, and buried her face in her hands. Her whole body shook with sobs. Thomas didn't know what to say. He didn't have answers to questions this big. So he did what he'd done in the shelter. He sat down beside her, just present, just there. Eventually, Eleanor's crying subsided into hiccups. She looked up at him with red, swollen eyes. I'm sorry, she said. I shouldn't have come here. I'm a mess. You're not a mess. You're human. Same thing. She laughed weakly. Thomas grabbed a towel from his dresser, one of 2 he owned, and handed it to her. She dried her face and hair, then just sat there, holding the damp towel. Can I tell you something? Eleanor asked quietly. Something I haven't told anyone? Of course. My father, before he left for the Philippines, he told me he was afraid, not of dying, of what America was becoming. He said fear makes people cruel, makes them do things they can't take back. She looked at Thomas. He was right, and now he's gone, and I'm here watching everything he warned me about come true, and I can't do anything to stop it. Maybe you're not supposed to stop alone, Thomas said. Maybe that's too much for one person. Then what am I supposed to do? Survive. Bear witness. Remember the people who got hurt. And when this is all over, if we live that long, tell the truth about what happened. Don't let people forget. Eleanor studied him in the dim light from the single bulb overhead. You're different than I thought. How so? When I first saw you in the shelter, I thought you were just another scared guy trying to be a hero. But you're not scared, are you? You're angry. Thomas realized she was right. Underneath the frustration and the shame about being rejected from service, there was anger at the war, at the unfairness of it all, at the fact that people like Mrs. Tanaka were being punished for existing, while people like him were told they weren't good enough to fight. Yeah, he admitted. I'm angry. Good, Eleanor said. Anger means you still care. She stood up, wringing out the towel. I should go. Let you sleep? Where are you staying? You said you were with a friend? A woman from the shipyard. But she's got family visiting, so... Eleanor trailed off. I'll figure something out. Stay here, Thomas said before he could overthink it. Eleanor raised an eyebrow. I'll take the floor, he added quickly. You take the bed. It's too late and too cold for you to be wandering around. She looked like she might argue. Then she nodded. Okay, thank you. Thomas grabbed his extra blanket, thin and moth-eaten but better than nothing, and made a nest on the floor. Eleanor lay down on the bed, still wearing her damp clothes. Thomas? She said into the darkness. Yeah. Do you think people can be good, even when the world is terrible? He thought about his brother Daniel, who'd enlisted the day after Pearl Harbor, about Mrs. Chun, who made sandwiches for her neighbors despite barely having enough food for herself, about Eleanor, who cried for strangers being taken away. Yeah, he said, I think some people can. I hope you're right. Within minutes, her breathing slowed and deepened. Thomas lay awake on the hard floor, listening to the rain hammer against the window, and wondered how this strange, haunted woman had become so important to him in just a few short weeks. March 1942, San Francisco. Eleanor moved into room 304 on a Tuesday. It happened gradually, the way important things often do. First, she stayed one night, then 2. By the 3rd week, She had clothes hanging in Thomas's closet and a toothbrush next to the sink. They didn't talk about it, didn't make it official. She just stayed. Mrs. Chun smiled knowingly when she saw them together in the hallway. Mr. Kowalski muttered something in Polish that sounded approving. Frank Doherty raised his rent by $2 a month and said nothing else. Thomas didn't mind. The room felt less empty, with Eleanor in it, and she seemed steadier now, less likely to shatter at any moment. She still had nightmares. He'd wake to find her sitting by the window, staring out at the blacked-out city, but they were less frequent. They fell into a routine. Thomas worked the docks during the day. Eleanor worked swing shift at the shipyard. When their schedules aligned, they'd meet at Rossi's diner for eggs and burnt coffee. On Sundays, they'd walk along the waterfront, watching ships come and go, carrying soldiers to wars they might not return from. They didn't talk about the future. There wasn't one to talk about. Not really. Just today, and maybe tomorrow if they were lucky. But then everything changed. It started with a newspaper. Thomas was eating breakfast at the boarding house kitchen, a shared space where tenants could use a hot plate and icebox, when Frank Doherty slapped the Morning Chronicle onto the table. You see this? Frank jabbed a thick finger at the headline. Doolittle's raid. Bombed Tokyo. First time we've hit the Japanese mainland since Pearl Harbor. Thomas picked up the paper. April 18, 1942. Lieutenant Colonel James Doolittle had led 16B, 25 bombers off an aircraft carrier, something everyone said was impossible, and struck targets in Tokyo, Yokohama, and other Japanese cities. Most of the crews had crashed or bailed out over China. Some were missing, some were dead, but they'd done it. They'd hit back. About damn time, Frank said, pouring himself coffee. Show those bastards we're not finished yet. Thomas read the article carefully. The raid hadn't caused major damage. It was mostly symbolic. But symbols mattered in wartime. Morale mattered. And for the first time since Pearl Harbor, Americans had something to celebrate. One line caught his attention. Several crew members remain unaccounted for, including the son of decorated Army Air Corps Captain William Wild Bill Mitchell, who himself has been missing since the fall of the Philippines. Thomas's blood went cold. William Mitchell. Captain William Mitchell. Eleanor Mitchell. His hands started shaking. He read the line again, then a third time, trying to make sense of it. You all right, Calloway? Frank asked. Look like you've seen a ghost. I'm fine, Thomas lied. He folded the newspaper and stood up quickly. I gotta go. He took the stairs to his room 2 at a time. Eleanor was still asleep when he burst through the door. She'd worked a double shift the night before and hadn't gotten home until 4 in the morning. She was curled up on the bed, dark hair spread across the pillow, one hand tucked under her cheek. Thomas stood there, breathing hard, newspaper clutched in his fist. She stirred, opening one eye. Thomas? What time is it? Who's William Mitchell? He asked. Eleanor went very still. The sleep vanished from her face, replaced by something guarded and afraid. What? Captain William Mitchell. Wild Bill Mitchell, Army Air Corps. Thomas held up the newspaper. The article says he's missing since the Philippines. Says his son was on the Doolittle raid and is also missing. Eleanor sat up slowly. She looked at the newspaper like it was a snake. That's your father, isn't it? Thomas continued. You said he was Army Air Corps. You said he went missing at the Philippines. But you never told me he was famous. He's not famous, Eleanor said quietly. He's just a pilot. Just a pilot? Eleanor, they're writing articles about him. They're calling him a legend. She wrapped her arms around herself. That defensive posture Thomas had seen in the shelter. What do you want me to say? The truth. Who is he? Who are you? Eleanor flinched. For a moment, Thomas thought she might run. Then her shoulders sagged, and she looked at him with those haunted green eyes. Sit down, she said. Please. Thomas sat in the chair by the window. His heart was hammering. Eleanor took a deep breath. My father is Captain William Mitchell. He's been in the Army Air Corps for 20 years. He fought in the last war, World War I, flew reconnaissance missions over France. After the war, he became a test pilot, broke speed records. developed new tactics for bombing runs. He trained half the pilots who are fighting right now. Why didn't you tell me? Because everyone knows him. Everyone has opinions about Wild Bill Mitchell and his crazy ideas and his famous missions. Nobody sees him. They see the legend. She looked down at her hands. When I told people who my father was, they get this look in their eyes. Like I was special by association. Like I matter because of him. I didn't want that with you. Thomas felt his anger deflating. So you lied. I didn't lie. I just didn't tell you everything. Eleanor met his gaze. That night in the shelter, you gave me your coat because I was cold, not because of who my father was. You sat with me because I needed help, not because you wanted to meet Wild Bill Mitchell's daughter. You were kind to me, Thomas. Just me. Do you know how rare that is? He didn't know what to say. The article, Eleanor said softly, "What does it say about my brother?" Thomas had almost forgotten. You have a brother? David. He's 5 years older than me. Followed Dad into the Air Corps. Her voice cracked. What does it say? Thomas unfolded the newspaper and read. Lieutenant David Mitchell, son of Captain William Mitchell, was part of Crew 12 in the Tokyo raid. His B-25 was hit by anti-aircraft fire over the city and last seen heading toward the Chinese coast. Status unknown. Eleanor made a sound like something breaking inside her chest. Thomas crossed the room and sat beside her on the bed. This time, he didn't hesitate. He pulled her into his arms, and she collapsed against him, sobbing. They're both gone, she whispered into his shoulder. Dad and David, both gone. You don't know that. Missing isn't dead. Missing might as well be dead. At least dead gives you closure. Thomas held her tighter. He thought about his own brother, Daniel, somewhere in the Pacific. He thought about all the families waiting for news that might never come. The war was eating people, chewing them up and spitting out grief. Why didn't you tell me about David? He asked gently. Because if I talked about him, I'd have to admit he might die, that they both might die, that I might lose everyone I love. Eleanor pulled back, wiping her eyes. I'm sorry. I should have been honest with you. Hey! Thomas caught her chin, making her look at him. I don't care who your father is. I don't care if he's famous or not. I care about you. The woman who cries over strangers being taken to camps. The woman who rivets hull plates and argues with telegram messengers and falls asleep reading Steinbeck. That's who matters to me. Eleanor stared at him. Why? Why what? Why do you care? I'm a disaster, Thomas. I'm broken and angry, and I drag everyone down with me. You're not a disaster. You're surviving. He squeezed her hand. And for the record, you haven't dragged me anywhere I didn't want to go. She almost smiled. You're too good for me. I'm really not. They sat in silence for a while, Eleanor's head resting on his shoulder. Outside, the city was waking up. Car horns, distant sirens, the clatter of the cable cars. Tell me about him, Thomas said finally. Your father. The real him, not the legend. Eleanor was quiet for a long moment. Then, he used to take me flying when I was little, before Mom died. He'd rent a little Stearman biplane, and we'd go up over the bay. I'd sit in the front cockpit, and he'd do barrel rolls and loops, and I'd scream and laugh until I couldn't breathe. Sounds terrifying. It was amazing. She smiled at the memory. He'd say, Eleanor, remember this. Gravity is just a suggestion. Fear is just noise. The only thing that matters is whether you have the courage to keep climbing. Sounds like something a pilot would say. He believed it, though, even when everyone told him his ideas were crazy. Even when they tried to ground him for being too reckless. He just kept flying, kept pushing, kept believing there was a way to win. He sounds like a good man. He is. Eleanor's voice broke again. Is. I don't know anymore. Thomas pulled her closer. He's alive until someone tells you otherwise. And even if the worst happens, he's alive in you, in the stories, in the way you keep fighting, even when everything's falling apart. That doesn't die. Eleanor turned to look at him, her eyes red but clear. How did you get so wise, Thomas Calloway? I'm not wise. I just pay attention. She kissed him then, soft and tentative, like she was afraid he might pull away. Thomas didn't pull away. He kissed her back, tasting salt from her tears, and something else, something like hope. When they broke apart, Eleanor whispered, I'm scared. Me too. What are we going to do? Same thing we've been doing, Thomas said. Survive, bear witness, remember. And if we can't, then at least we tried. 2 weeks later, Thomas was loading crates onto a transport ship when someone called his name. He turned to find a man in an army uniform standing on the dock, a major based on the insignia. Middle-aged, square-jawed, holding a folder. Thomas Calloway, the major asked, Yes, sir. I'm Major Henderson, Army Air Corps. I need to speak with you about Eleanor Mitchell. Thomas's stomach dropped. Is she all right? She's fine, but I need to ask you some questions. Henderson gestured toward a quiet corner of the dock. It's about her father. They walked away from the noise and bustle. Thomas's mind raced through possibilities, none of them good. Mr. Calloway, Henderson began, how long have you known Miss Mitchell? Since December. Why? What's happened? We've received intelligence about Captain Mitchell's location. He's alive. Thomas's knees nearly gave out. He's alive. He's in a Japanese POW camp in the Philippines. Cabanat 1. Henderson's expression was grim. Conditions are difficult. We're planning an operation to extract high-value prisoners, but it won't happen for months, maybe longer. In the meantime, we need to keep this information classified. The Japanese can't know we're aware of his location. Does Eleanor know? Not yet. That's why I'm here. Henderson opened the folder. Captain Mitchell managed to get a message out through the underground resistance. It was addressed to his daughter. He handed Thomas a piece of paper, dirty, creased, covered in cramped handwriting. Thomas read, Eleanor, if you're reading this, I'm still breathing. Barely, but breathing counts. They got me at Clarkfield, shot down during the retreat. Spent 2 months in the jungle before they caught me. Now I'm in a camp with about 500 other poor bastards. Listen to me carefully. I need you to stop blaming yourself. For Mom, for David, for me, none of this is your fault. War is bigger than any of us. David made his choice the same way I made mine. He believed in something worth fighting for. Whether he's alive or dead in God, I hope he's alive. He did his duty. Be proud of him. And if you see him before I do, tell him his old man says well done. I don't know if I'll make it home. Probably won't, if I'm honest. But I need you to promise me something. Survive, whatever it takes. Find someone who sees you for who you are, not who I am. Build a life. Don't let this war steal your future the way it stole mine. Gravity is just a suggestion, kiddo. Keep climbing. All my love, Dad. Thomas's hands were shaking when he finished reading. He looked up at Henderson. She needs to see this. I agree. But officially, this letter doesn't exist. Neither does our conversation. Henderson took the letter back and handed Thomas a sealed envelope. This is a copy. Give it to her. Tell her to keep it private. If anyone asks, she never heard from him. I understand. Henderson studied him. Captain Mitchell's letter mentioned his daughter, finding someone who sees her for who she is, based on our surveillance. Surveillance? We believe that person is you, Mr. Calloway. Take care of her. She's going to need you when the war ends, however it ends. Before Thomas could respond, Henderson turned and walked away, disappearing into the crowd of soldiers and dock workers. Thomas stood there, clutching the envelope, his heart pounding. That evening, Eleanor was making dinner, or trying to. She'd burned the potatoes and over-salted the soup, but Thomas didn't care. He sat at the small table they'd wedged into the corner of room 304, watching her move around the hot plate, and tried to figure out how to tell her. You're quiet, Eleanor said, glancing at him. Something wrong? No. Yes. I don't know. Thomas pulled the envelope from his pocket. I have something for you. She turned off the hot plate and sat down across from him. frowning. "What is it?" "It's from your father." Eleanor's face went white. "What?" Thomas handed her the envelope. "He's alive, Eleanor. He's in a POW camp in the Philippines." He got a message out. She opened the envelope with shaking hands and read the letter. Thomas watched emotions flicker across her face. Disbelief, relief, grief, joy, all tumbling over each other. By the time she finished, tears were streaming down her cheeks. "He's alive," she whispered. "He's alive." "Yeah. And David—" "The letter says he doesn't know. But there's hope." Eleanor clutched the letter to her chest like it was the most precious thing in the world. "How did you get this?" Thomas told her about Major Henderson and the classified operation. When he finished, Eleanor was crying harder. "I blame myself," she said. "When Mom died, cancer, when I was 16, Dad threw himself into his work. Flying became everything. And when David joined up, I thought it was my fault. Like they were both running away from me. Like I wasn't enough to keep them home. Eleanor, but he doesn't blame me. He's in that camp, probably dying, and he took the time to tell me it's not my fault." She looked at Thomas through her tears. "How did I get so lucky? To have a father like that? To have you?" "I'm the lucky one," Thomas said quietly. "You walked into a shelter during an air raid, shivering and scared, and I thought, here's someone who needs help. But I was wrong. You didn't need me to save you. You just needed someone to sit with you while you saved yourself." Eleanor stood up and crossed him. She pulled him to his feet and kissed him hard, desperate, like she was trying to press every emotion into that single moment. "I love you," she said against his lips. "I don't care if it's too soon or if we barely know each other or if the world is ending. I love you, Thomas Calloway." Thomas's chest felt like it might explode. "I love you too." They held each other in the tiny room. The burnt potatoes forgotten. The war raging on outside. The future uncertain and terrifying and beautiful all at once. "What happens now?" Eleanor asked. "I don't know. We wait. We hope. We keep surviving. What if he doesn't make a home? Then we remember him. We tell his story. We make sure people know there was a man named Wild Bill Mitchell who kept climbing even when gravity tried to drag him down." Eleanor smiled through her tears. "He'd like that." "Yeah, I think he would." August 1945. Thomas stood on the dock, Eleanor's hand in his, watching the hospital ship pull into San Francisco Bay. The war was over. Japan had surrendered. The world was trying to remember how to be normal again. "Do you see him?" Eleanor asked, standing on her toes. "Not yet." They'd gotten a telegram 3 months ago. Captain William Mitchell liberated from Kabanawan POW camp. Conditions stable. Returning stateside. And now, finally, after 4 years of wondering and waiting and hoping, Wild Bill Mitchell was coming home. The gangplank lowered. Soldiers began disembarking. Some on stretchers, some walking with canes, all of them thin and hollow-eyed. Eleanor squeezed Thomas's hand so hard it hurt. Then Thomas saw him, a man in a too large army uniform, leaning on a crutch, his hair white and his face gaunt. But his eyes, those sharp, clear eyes, were the same ones Thomas saw in Eleanor every day. "Dad." Eleanor broke away and ran. William Mitchell looked up. His face crumpled. He dropped the crutch and opened his arms, and Eleanor crashed into him, both of them crying. Thomas stayed back, giving them space. He watched the reunion. Father and daughter, both survivors, both scarred, both still here, and felt something loosen in his chest. After a long moment, Eleanor turned and beckoned him over. "Dad," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "This is Thomas, the man I told you about, the one who gave me his coat." William Mitchell studied Thomas with those sharp eyes. Then he extended a hand. "Thomas Calloway," he said, his voice rough from years of disuse. "My daughter says you saved her life." "No, sir," Thomas said, shaking his hand. "I just gave her a coat. She saved herself." Mitchell smiled, the same smile Eleanor wore when she was proud of something. "Eleanor wrote to me. Letters took months to arrive, but I got a few. She said you helped a shivering stranger during an air raid, never imagining she was the daughter of a legendary pilot. He paused. Except I'm not legendary. I'm just a man who was lucky enough to come home. And you, son, are the real hero. You kept my daughter alive when I couldn't. You gave her a reason to keep climbing. Thomas felt his throat tighten. I just did what anyone would do. No, Mitchell said firmly. You did what good people do. And in times like these, that's the rarest thing in the world. Eleanor slipped her hand back into Thomas's, and he realized she was wearing a ring, the simple gold band he'd given her 6 months ago when he'd finally worked up the courage to propose. We're getting married next month, Eleanor told her father. I wanted to wait until you got home. Mitchell's eyes filled with tears again. I wouldn't miss it for the world. They walked together off the dock, into the sunshine, into a future that suddenly seemed possible again. Behind them, the hospital ship's horn sounded, a long, low note that echoed across the bay. Thomas thought about that night in the shelter, about a shivering stranger in a coat and the simple decision to help, about how the smallest act of kindness could ripple outward in ways you'd never imagine. He looked at Eleanor, then at her father, Wild Bill Mitchell, legendary pilot, survivor, hero, and realized that legends were just ordinary people who kept climbing when everyone else gave up. Thank you, Mitchell said quietly, squeezing Thomas's shoulder, for seeing her, for seeing us. Anytime, Thomas said. That's what we do. We survive. We bear witness. We remember. Mitchell nodded, understanding something deeper in those words. And as they walked into the golden California afternoon, Thomas Calloway, the man with flat feet and a bad heart who'd never fired a shot in a war, understood that he'd been a hero after all, not the kind in the newspapers, the invisible kind, the kind that mattered most.